Hi, everyone. Mandy here. Restorative grief is all about creating easy access to healing, no matter where or who you are. That's why I want you to remember that if you want grief support beyond a podcast, there's a whole community of restorative grievers just waiting to hold space for you. Join the Restorative Grief Project through the link in our show notes or connect with me on social media if you have any questions about it. No more pretending that you can handle grief alone, okay? Now let's get on to this week's episode. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 149, titled Now That She's Gone, with Chelsea Ohlemiller. One of the scariest parts of grieving is trying to learn what we need after our person is gone. My guest today is my friend and fellow author, Chelsea Ohlemiller. Chelsea is the voice and face of Happiness, Hope, and Harsh Realities, an online blog and community for grievers to explore and express themselves with other grievers. And today she's here to share a bit of her story and tell us all about her debut book, Now That She's Gone, A Daughter's Reflections on Loss, Love, and a Mother's Legacy. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. I'm your host, Mandy. If you're familiar with my story at all, you know that I lost my mom to cancer in 2016, and her death is the catalyst behind my work. And my guest today has a similar story with her own writing and her upcoming book release. My friend Chelsea Ohlemiller is here, and I am so glad to have you here today, Chelsea.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so excited that we get to talk again and connect, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah. So unfortunately, like I mentioned, we have the worst possible thing in common, having dead moms.
Yep.
Um, Tell me, how was your story like coming to the surface when you realized, oh, cool, now I'm a motherless daughter. Now what?
Yeah. That it's funny that you say that because honestly, I never heard that term, until my mom passed and somebody said, "Oh, you're motherless." And I thought, "No, I'm not motherless. My mom is just, not here with me." And so that was kind of a term I had to grasp with. I've actually written about it, but yeah. So my mom in 2017 passed away. She was only 57. She passed away from cancer as well. And really, like you have probably experienced yourself, but grief just completely changed my life. It changed my priorities. It changed me at my core. And yeah, I was a teacher. I loved my job. I loved my family. But nobody in my life really could relate. I had best friends that still had their grandparents, which is so beautiful, but they stopped treating me like myself, and they wouldn't bring up my mom or their mom. And so I found that that's when I learned that grief makes people uncomfortable, and people want to fix things and you can't fix that. And so I really just started writing to heal myself and to be honest about the things no one was really comfortable talking about. And I had no idea it would lead to, being published on multiple platforms, building my own brand, and just really helping others in a similar situation, and connecting me with people like you. So, while I would trade anything to have my mom back, if I can do something with her legacy to make her proud, that's my entire mission.
I think that's the beautiful part about recognizing the impact of a loss like this is looking forward at legacy, both to carry it with us from someone else and to also recognize we're redefining our own legacies and we get to
Exactly.
affect culture around us because you're exactly right. They don't know how to grieve. And I say they so globally, but we
Yep.
we don't know how to grieve. We don't know how to be human. And this unavoidable experience really shoves us into face to face with the scariest parts of life. And that's
Absolutely.
yeah, you have this beautiful website and blog, Happiness, Hope, and Harsh Realities. And I think obviously in that title alone, you're encompassing so much of it. What started the decision of, okay, these are the three topics that I want to really focus on with my writing?
Yeah. So the funny thing is the name, happiness, hope, and harsh realities. Actually comes from my children. So all of my children are H names. I have Hattie, Hudson, and Highland. And so my husband actually came up with it and he said, why don't we use their names and basically have a themed, happiness, hope, harsh realities off of what you're talking about, and then have kind of that sentimental value behind it. So that's how the name came up. I didn't feel qualified or worthy enough to use my name, like Chelsea Ohlemiller. I don't know why, I just didn't. And so we came up with something else, but really at the heart of it, it matched my work because more than anything, I wanted to be able to write about the raw truths of grief, like the harsh things that, to be, I mean, honest, aren't easy to read, but it's stuff that we're experiencing. I wanted to talk about losing my faith. I wanted to talk about, being on the bathroom floor and not feeling like I could move and that there was nobody that understood what I was going through and the entire world was still moving in, a positive way and going about their day. And so I really just wanted to make sure that I touched on the things that are difficult to talk about, and then also reminded people that while I was there and I've been on the bathroom floor or in the shower crying or, in the depths of grief, whatever that looked like for me, that I am living a beautiful life. And I do have love and hope and happiness in my life still. It just looks different without my mom here. And so I wanted to kind of just hit all of the things, that our lives encompass, and that if your life doesn't now hold grief and harsh realities, that sadly one day it will. And so I wanted it to be also just welcoming for people to enter it when they're ready.
I think you do a wonderful job making it welcoming and approachable for the first note.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I remember when we talked the first time on your podcast live show, and feeling very honored by how many people showed up just to hear and hold space and bear witness and learn about a different perspective and approach to loss, because we do get very frozen and very isolated in our experience and the meaning that comes from it for us, feeling like no one understands or no one can show up for us in a way that we need to. And I think that you've done a really beautiful job through your writing of widening the gap to say there's actually space for all of our experiences here. What does it look like if you own your own experience? And how does that then change how you show up for other people too?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you noticed that, because that's one of the things I'm most proud about. A lot of times when I go on podcasts or different things, people will mention the number of followers that I have. And it always stings because I don't like to focus on the numbers. I really like to focus on the hearts, because just like you said, these women, primarily women, but there are some men on there that are showing up not only for themselves to heal, but to really have a space and community of people who understand, who get it. And it's just this kind of sisterhood of a collective experience. And while we're all on our own paths and it's different, I always say, I'm writing my experience and my story, but I hope you find yourself in it, so that if you need a piece to share with your husband about how you're feeling, God gave me the words. I truly feel like I've been given the words for a reason. And so they're not just for me, they're for other people. And that's one of the things I love about the page, is just all the people that show up and connect. They share their own stories. They share how things resonate, and just the communication and connection that is on my Facebook and my Instagram and places like that is one of the things I'm most proud about.
It's funny you say it that way when you said, I'm looking at them as hearts, because as I was thinking about you this morning and thinking about this conversation, I started to write out something about a community of like-minded people. And I stopped and said, no, it's a community of like-hearted people, but I don't know if that works correctly. I don't think it
I
quite
love
works,
it.
but that's exactly what you just described, was like-hearted people who are trusting that we are wholehearted people, or like holistic people.
Yep.
We have heart, mind, body, spirit, right? But that heart-centered approach to grief is an incredibly vulnerable and open space that we tend to avoid.
Yep. And I always tell people too, you have to be, there are people on, your platform and my platform that are at various stages. So
Right.
some are just there to to really read other stories. They're not ready to share their own, and that's okay. Some have been in this so long that they show up and they offer all the wisdom from 20 years of grief or 30 years of grief. And that's the beauty of it, is that, not only is everyone on their own path, but everyone's on their own timeline and their own level of experience. And it's just a shared journey where some days you show up as the light in that, on my platform, and other days you show up as the person that needs the light, and so I love that. And I think that, anybody that's in this grief space and doing grief work is, near and dear to my heart, and somebody that I admire, because these are not things that, we talk about often enough. And it's silly because it's the most universal experience that we have in this life. Every single person, no matter what country you're in, no matter what language you speak. I mean, there is no greater universal experience than loss and death and life. And so, I just think that if we can talk about it and let people understand it in any capacity that's greater than just the base level, then we're doing, a good deed.
Yeah, I was thinking about your work and the way that you make space for people to, like you said, either be the light or receive the light. And this morning, my thoughts have been around how our like base desire as humans, whether we can articulate it or not, is to be seen, heard, and known, right?
Yep.
To have someone fully notice everything, but notice enough about us that we feel safe. There's belonging, and we create security with them. And learning to embody that way of living is not a natural state. That idea that grief then forces us to decide, will you learn that way of living or will you not? Not in a binary sense, but in a, hey, you're at a precipice. You have a decision to make. What decision will you make? And how long will you resist said decision? Because I think that's where a lot of grievers get very, very fearful and can feel stuck, is recognizing they know they have a decision to make in front of them, but they don't necessarily have the capacity to make that choice. And so it's the freeze before the choice
Yep.
that really locks us up. And I was thinking about how you became a writer as well, because you haven't always been writing about losing your mom. That
Nope.
started in 2017. But what about prior to that?
Yeah, so my mom actually always loved my writing. So I have written, I would say, since I was a kid, I would write
Yeah.
poems and I had journals and things like that. And I've always been, I think that one of my qualities that helped me be a really good kindergarten teacher is that I'm very, expressive, and I'm a complete empath. And so I would just, use that in my writing, but I never showed anybody. I mean, my mom would see it, but I didn't ever think that that was even an option for me. I don't know why I didn't consider writing. I considered it more of just something you do in the, free time, not something that you have as a profession. And so, like I said, I was a teacher, I was happy. And my mom always told me I should write. And sadly, I never listened until, after she passed. But I'm glad I listened, because it has been one of the best decisions I've ever made. It makes me choke up a little bit just because I started having all of these incredible dreams and wishes and hopes after she passed, because, like I said, my life just took on a different purpose and a different meaning. And like you said earlier, I just wanted to do something with her legacy, but also realizing that while doing something with her legacy, I'm making my own as well. And I wanted to be something that's, meaningful and has a purpose greater than myself.
Yeah. I think that those moments of realizing, oh no, I waited for this magical, incredible, life-changing experience. What have I missed out on is part of the grief process too. As you were talking, not that you've articulated that that's how you feel, but
Yeah.
it's interesting, even just listening to you talk and thinking about people who show up to hear you and read your words. If there's a sense of urgency to move toward this thing that we know has been within us, we know that I've been a writer my whole life as well. And being able to honor that space in my life has been a spectrum. There have been times when
Mhm.
I don't write at all. Just the other day, I picked up a pen and was writing by hand, and I wrote page after page. And the next morning, my hand was achy. And it took me a minute to realize, oh my gosh, I haven't written by hand in long enough that my hand aches.
Yep.
That's wild. And instead of thinking like, oh, I've missed out, I had this sense of urgency to draw me back toward it and recognizing like, we don't need a traumatic event in our lives to go toward the thing we know we're meant to do or that brings us to life. Unfortunately, traumatic events and grief events sometimes help us get a little
Yep.
closer to those things.
Yep. I think
Oh,
they remind us that, you know, just the extreme fragility of life and, you know, losing a parent. I had lost grandparents before losing my mom, you know, but losing a parent really changes the type of adult you are. It changes the type of person you are. And you realize just how short life is, and that for me, my mom being only 57, it made me realize that sometimes life is even shorter than we could even imagine or plan for. And so it gave me a different kind of, you know, hurry of what I wanted to do. And also my priorities shifted of what I wanted to spend my time with. But the thing that was hardest for me and is still hard to this day, even, you know, especially with the book coming out, is sometimes it's hard for me to wrap my mind around that this version of myself that I am right now, my mom doesn't know or didn't know. I am a mom to three now, and an author, and things that she never got to see. And so it's hard to keep stepping forward into a future, even though it's beautiful and brilliant and bright, when I know this is an unknown person to my mom, if that makes sense, you know?
it makes perfect sense. I was going to ask a similar question about what it's like knowing that you did the thing that mom said, go and do this thing. It's what you're meant to do. And you did it after.
Yeah. I
I
think
know
it
how it felt.
shows. Yeah, I think it for me it shows. I'm always telling my daughter, especially because she's our oldest, just, you know, you better listen to your mom. Like, you know, I mean, moms truly do know best. And I mean, most moms, you know, I don't want to speak for everybody, but in my case, my mom always knew what was best for me. She always knew, probably before I did, what I was good at and what I would excel in. And yeah, it's just a unique situation. But I do want to say that my relationship with my mother was one of, you know, we were very close. My mom was the greatest woman I have ever known. I apologize for getting emotional, but she just was a brilliant source of everything that the world needs, you know, just the light and the hope. And she was so compassionate and just a wonderful person. But I also realized that that is not the case for everybody.
Right.
And so, one important thing that I did in my book, that I've done a little bit online, but that I made sure to do in my book, is the end of each chapter, it ends with a section called when it's complicated.
Mm.
And those pieces are all written from women that I talk to. I basically wrote their heart and their stories, you know, with their inspiration of women that it didn't come easy. Maybe their mom was estranged, or it was complicated, or, you know, they weren't close. And so I wanted to make sure that there was representation and inspiration for people that didn't have a relationship like I did with my mom. And
Yeah.
so I also always try to acknowledge that when I'm telling my story and speaking very highly of my mom, I understand that, you know, those relationships don't look the same with every mother-daughter relationship or parent-child. So, um, there's space for all of us, even though I talk, you know, so highly of my mom.
I want to go back to something you said, the moms know best, because I giggle every time I hear that. I think there's a lot of us who would say, my mom she didn't get it right all the time. And I had a wonderful and distant relationship with my mom. I'm actually consistently trying to keep her human in my mind after she's gone, if that makes sense.
Yep. Oh, I
To,
completely agree.
yeah, keep her like off that pedestal, but also remember, like, as a human, here are some of the mistakes she made. How did those affect me? How can I leave her in her context and still love her and continue the bond with her in a way that doesn't feel like glorifying and minimizing the things that were hard and difficult? But I think
Yes.
too, what you're describing is the willingness of a person to hear you and know you and see you
Yep.
in a way that is honoring of you, right? Because that that phrase mom knows best almost tells us we like the implied statement there is don't ignore them, don't push back, don't resist, don't ignore.
At least listen.
Yeah, at least. And I think that that's where we need to take it is really say like there are people who see you from an angle that you can't see. This is
Yep.
why relationship is so necessary. And when we can humble ourselves to be in relationship, because it's a humbling, then we will allow someone like that, someone who has known us our whole lives and watched us try things and fail, watch us try things and succeed. Those people can speak to us in a very different way. And losing that voice, losing that guide when it is a safe and healthy relationship is one of the most jarring experiences, even when we see it coming,
Yep.
even when it's, whether it's suddenly, whether it's years of coming and waiting for illness to take over, whatever it is, there's such a disruption that I think your writing, and I want to get into talking about your book too, allows space for the disruption, the honor, the frustration, the fear. All of it really comes together beautifully in how you have presented your story.
Oh, thank you. And I want to say too that just like you said, like, mother knows best is so like cliche and kind of very broad, but that doesn't mean, my mom didn't get it wrong or that moms don't get it wrong. Moms get it wrong all the time. But what I learned from losing my mom so early is that I should have listened more, because mothers, or really parents in general, they're looking from a completely different viewpoint of us, of our lives. They're looking through a lens of love, whatever that love looks like, and guidance and expectations and all of these things. But at the border and the foundation is, you ask most parents, what do they want for their children? And most of the time it's happiness. I think my mom would have said, I wanted her to know she was loved always. And I did, but that doesn't mean that she was this perfect, mother. But I think that's what makes parents special, is that, you know what, you mess up too, and you'll learn from all of that.
Right.
But, I definitely, through losing my mom, I cherish her advice so much more now than what I did then. And I wish I would have done that a little differently.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the ability to get advice from people, I don't know. Okay, this is a personal question. How do you feel when someone's like, well, your mother would have said XYZ, and you're
Oh,
like, the hell she would have.
yeah.
That's not her advice. I realize you're
Yes.
family to her too, but like, you don't know.
Oh, I wrote a whole piece on that because that was the hardest thing, is that after she passed, do you know how many people, especially family members, would come up to me and say, your mother wouldn't want you to cry?
Which is a
Okay.
BS response in general. Let's just
Well,
clarify
first of
everyone.
all, my mother cried all the time. Like my mother's mother cried all the time. Like I
Yeah.
come from a, strong family of empaths, and we cry whether we're happy, sad, mad, whatever. So,
Yeah.
I was like, actually, I don't think that's true, but also, or just your mother would want you to be happy, just all of your mother would. And I finally got brave enough, probably at a year in, to say, I wish I knew what my mother would want. And there's sometimes I feel like she would want that, but she's not here. So please let her voice stay her voice, and let me remember her and her advice the way I do, like, let me just be, thank you for if you want to tell me that, aunt, as my aunt, here's what you think for me. That's great. But when it feels like you're kind of stealing my mother's voice or her opinion of how I should be living, like, it just feels like you're crossing a boundary that just feels a little bit invasive and harsh. So let's just avoid that.
That's such a beautiful way to put it. Let her voice remain her voice, because we want to shut down platitudes and minimizing in every opportunity that we can. But that articulates it in a really clear way as to why such a statement is harmful, because we know that someone who says, oh, they wouldn't want you to cry, is actually saying, I'm uncomfortable that you're crying. If you could get it together, that would be great for me. And
Yes.
for you to frame it in this way is to say, whereas I would say, I don't care that you're uncomfortable. I cry all the time. Maybe you should do some work on yourself. And then I would walk away. Like, I'm so confrontational,
Yeah.
and for lots of reasons. But I love that softer response of, actually, we don't have information about what she would say. Let's be rational here. You want to
Yep.
talk about no tears? Let's get rational for a moment.
Right.
That that is a very clear correction, and very loving correction to a person who needs to be reminded. Girl, you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Girl, you do not know. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let's talk about your book. The title is Now That She's Gone, A Daughter's Reflections on Lost Love and a Mother's Legacy. So we're recording this before the book is coming out, but it's live right after the book has been released. So,
Yes.
so
It's
don't tell me how
available
you
for
feel after the book.
pre-order.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pre-ordered, but now that it's
Official
live,
release date is August 13th.
yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
what's the book about? You already winked a little bit at the it's complicated piece, which I love is
Yeah.
so compassionate to offer, but tell us a little more about the stories.
Yeah. So what I love about this book is that it's a collection of essays.
Mhm.
There are some in there that people that have been following me for a while might recognize. There, a few of my pieces went, viral as they call it or whatever, which really, I just feel like it resonated with people.
Yep.
And so those pieces are tucked and included inside the book so that, my readers have a place to find all of those special pieces that they've already fallen in love with. And the rest is just, yeah, a bunch of essays that talk about all aspects of grief. So it's written so that you don't have to read it in order, but obviously if you do, that's great. It goes from fresh grief to what do I do now? What's the end goal here? How do I keep moving? And the last piece is now that she's gone. So it's the same title as the book of just, now that she's gone, how can you make your life worthwhile and beautiful while still honoring all the grief, the empty spaces you have, the absences that will show up at Mother's Days and celebrations and all of those things. And so I think it really just encompasses from the very first moment that my mom passed away and those harsh, raw, very complicated feelings and emotions and experiences all the way up to, where I am now and how I found light and love again. It's just, things are just a little bit different. So,
Mm. You know, that bit you mentioned there about what do you do now that Mother's Day comes around and there's an absence that is present. It reminded me, my friend Laura Fox lost her father and wrote a book about the missing and how the missing would
oh,
show up everywhere. And that was my response when I heard her describe her experience of grief as well was it's a missing. It is a tangible thing that is present, and yet it is an absence in and of itself. And the recognition of that can't hit until you experience it. Like we can talk about it, but until you're
yep,
in the moment, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So it's not like you can prepare for what will be the experience because it's always going to be nuanced and individual
yep,
to you as well. But man, every year for me, Mother's Day is a great example. It's completely different. I became a mom, right? I had one Mother's Day with my baby outside of my body and my mom in my space. So I have one memory of 4 generations at a table in Jacksonville, Oregon, and that's it. And so
mhm,
every year since, Mother's Day has been a loaded weapon. It's do you want to do nothing? Do you want to do everything? Do you want to be alone? Do you want to be together? And it changes throughout the day. And it's interesting
yeah,
how that sense of absence really doesn't hit until the day of, even though I've experienced it now for a decade.
yep. Well, and people always say, it like you said, every Mother's Day is different. It looks different. I'm the same way. Some years I want to do all the things with my children, and some years I just want to stay at home and be with them and do nothing. And it's the same way with just grief and celebrations and holidays and things in general, because I found that in my first year, everybody kept saying the first year is the hardest. The first year is the hardest. Number one, that wasn't true for me. The second year was actually the hardest, but
Yep.
also people kept saying, if you could just get through the firsts, the first holiday without hurt, the first whatever. But what people don't realize, and I learned that usually those people weren't really good at experiencing profound and deep, immense grief, is because the first are still happening for me. My mom passed in 2017, and my baby child who just graduated kindergarten, that's another first. My book coming out, that's another first. I graduated with my master's from, the University of Alabama. My mom wasn't there in the stands. That was another first, and so we are doing a disservice to people if we don't acknowledge that there is no, timeline. There is no year that's harder than another. You have no idea. It's just this web of yarn that is wound tightly. You can't see what piece is going to come out next, you know? And so it's one of those things that I hope also it, you know, is encompassed well in my book, is just how tricky it all is, you know?
As a grief educator, one of the things that we talk often about is the first 2 years are typically very heavy, and transitions happen after 2 years that kind of feel like a fog has thinned, but the
Mhm.
fog remains. And so when I hear you say, people tell me because it's true, they say I hear it all the time. The first year is the hardest because you'll go through anniversaries. The problem is we're braced for the first year. And so it
Mhm.
feels often less jarring because we are expecting it to be complicated. And so we are intentional in the way we approach, typically, right? If we
Yep.
know something is changing, we will brace, plan, strategize for that
Yep.
thing.
We've got our armor on.
We've got
We're ready
armor,
for
armored
battle.
up, we're prepared, we're circling the wagons. In that second year, because we have an understanding of what it was the first year, the expectation and letdown and surprise that we experience in the second and subsequent years are why it doesn't, quote, seem to get better. And I think that that's what you're describing. And I've read so much of your work that I know that's how you talk about it too, because that's the work that we have as people on this side of grief work who are inviting people into that space, is not to say, hey, actually stay braced, stay armored, stay prepared and vigilant. That's the opposite. We are saying, actually soften, open
Yep.
up, and come into these experiences knowing damn well it's going to be different than it was last year.
Yep.
How do you show up
You
for you?
Yes. I once had um a pastor from the hospice place that was you know, working with my mom at the end.
Mhm.
And he called and he said, I'll never forget this call. It's actually what led to the very first thing I ever wrote. And he said, he called and I didn't recognize the number. So I answered. I was around my entire family, my children, my husband, everybody. And um, he said, hello, I just wanted to check in on you because it's been 6 months since your mom passed away.
Mm.
And I became so uncontrollable in my crying because I hadn't put a timestamp on it. And so for him to say it's been this long, I thought, okay, well, this is real because I feel like for the first entire year, I was running from grief. So I didn't even sit with it. So that first year was a whirlwind. But he said something that has stayed with me forever. And it's been honestly one of the best pieces of advice. And I think he said it one because I couldn't talk, so I couldn't respond to him. And he said, I'm so sorry. You know, this is such a difficult time. And he said, I found that grief is like riding a roller coaster in the fog. You know that there are huge downs that you're going to go and huge ups, but you cannot see them. You know that they're there somewhere on the track of this roller coaster, but you can't see them. So you don't know, am I going to be on a hill or am I going to be on, you know, the downfall? And I thought, wow, you know, and I couldn't grasp the importance of that sentiment that he told me until years later. And I thought that man has no idea how true that is. And that's the very first thing I wrote about grief, was riding a roller coaster in the fog, and how that call really changed how patient I was with myself and how I looked at grief. You know, I realized it's not something I'm ever going to get over. I just need to start anticipating more of those climbs and falls a little better, even if I can't see them, you know?
It makes me think as well of somatic work, because on a roller coaster, your body is receiving mixed messages. So that alone, okay, so I'm going to get nerdy for a second. When you're strapped into a chair, your body is receiving the proprioception, the messages that we are still, we're secure, right? Your eyes see there's no motion, I'm sitting still. Your ears, they sense, okay, we're still. And then the motion begins, kind of like on an airplane. Your ears are getting the message of, no, girl, we're at 90 miles an hour, we're at 500 miles an hour. But the body's receiving this strapped in message. This is very confusing. What do I do? How do we respond? Which is why our stomach drops, which is why we feel all of those different sensations. And I feel like the messaging that we are relying on our eyes to see through the fog And thinking even like, okay, again, it's not about anticipating. How do you prepare? Like, what a cool invitation to say, like, also, what are you experiencing? What kind
Mhm.
of message are you carrying somatically that you can then access and be like, oh, a drop is coming. Okay. It's not just what we see. What else do we sense? That's such a cool piece. I might have to go back and I remember that essay. I might have to go back and reread it and like think through it. Maybe we need to, maybe there's a somatic roller coaster essay
Yeah,
coming too, because it's such a cool idea to recognize, yes, you have a lot of different parts that can contribute to your well-being and your more than survival and not just your thriving through it, but your experience of everything that you're going to encounter. You can be even more present in it.
absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. And luckily for you, I don't know if you should go back and read it. My writing's gotten a lot better. That was the very first piece. So you know how writing goes.
I
If
do.
you read that and you think, oh, this is not very good, just know that it gets better from there. That was the very, very first
Girl,
piece.
every time someone says, "Oh, you have a podcast," I think, "But skip season 1. But listen to the people. Skip the
Yep.
essays, listen to the interviews. The people are so smart. I should have them all back on and say, "Hi, I owe you better." Because I think similar things.
Oh, it's a
Similar
growth
apologies.
opportunity. It's a
Yeah,
learning experience.
it's important.
Just like grief. I mean, that's all
Yep,
that it is.
that's true. Oh, I could do an essay about grieving my early podcast episodes.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, man. Okay. Tell me about an essay in the book that you wrote that was really, really hard to write, or even that was really hard to share. Something that you were like, okay, nope, I have to do this, but I don't want to.
I think anything that had to do with my children, but it was important that we talk about the grief that our children experience.
Yeah.
And so one of the pieces that actually my best writing comes when I don't even think about it. I just type because it's just flowing through me.
Yeah.
And my daughter had something happen where she just was in immense grief and fear. And so it was a hard piece to write because it was so hard to experience as well. And so she just asked about the nothingness. She was afraid that, when we pass, that it'll just be nothingness. And she didn't want to be nothing. And so I, as a parent, was just, when they catch you off guard and you don't know what to say and you have to just speak immediately, but also, have a light and a vision for how you're going to handle this moment. And so writing that piece was delicate and hard to let it be in the book because it's such a vulnerable thing for both of us.
Mm.
So it wasn't hard to write, but it was one of those that I thought, oh, this is a really raw moment, and I hope people either can relate or at least approach it with you know, grace and understanding. So, but yeah, that was definitely I can't remember the exact title that we ended on, but something about, the nothingness.
I have very similar experiences with my daughter when she was about 4 to 7 at night. She
Yep,
would
that's what
have,
happens.
yep, these existential moments of what happens when we die, and I don't want to, and I know that something is I know you don't have answers, but now that makes it worse. And the intensity of those moments. And sometimes when I would just say, "I don't have answers, but I can sit with you
Yep.
because I'm crying now too." And it's
Yeah.
11:30 at night and we have to get up at 5. And those parenting moments are not, again, that's not something we prepare for as we are approaching grief or realizing that life continues around us and how we decide to show up. There's no planning for that. There's
Yep.
no, let me prepare the questions and answers that my kids are going to have.
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
and the thing that, sometimes we get these just, profound and wisdom pieces. And I will tell you, I mess up at parenting a lot.
Yeah.
But in that moment, I was so proud of my response. And I really feel like my mom was like helping guide me because
Yeah.
I didn't give her, this very lengthy response. One, I think
Mhm.
she just needed to be heard. And then at the end, I just told her, you know, you're my everything. And because of that, you can never be nothing.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like, I can tell you what our faith says and I can tell you what our hope and our belief is. But more than anything, I just need you to know that you have always been my everything, will always be my everything. So there's no chance that you will ever be nothing. And
Mm.
that's kind of how I left it. And I still remind her of that because we still do. I mean, just last night, honestly, she had another one of those moments. And, you just have to keep reminding them that sometimes you can't see and understand. You just have to have faith in whatever it is that you have in your belief system, and know that no matter what you believe, there's so much hope. And
Yeah.
at the end, hope can carry you far.
Mm. That's a beautiful thought to end on. Chelsea,
Oh,
it's so good.
thank you.
Okay, so your book, Now That She's Gone, A Daughter's Reflections on Lost Love and a Mother's Legacy, is available wherever books are sold. And where can people find you online if they want to read more of your day-to-day writing?
Yeah, so my website is just www.hopeandharshrealities.com, but I'm on all social media at Hope and Harsh Realities. So you can find me there.
Perfect. Chels, thank you so much for being here and for writing so honestly, so often, and for making that space for others to just explore what life and grief means for them too. You're such a gift.
Oh, thank you. I feel the exact same way about you. I think that your work is so powerful, and I'm so glad we met a few years ago, and I hope we can stay connected.
Thank you for listening to episode 149 of Restorative Grief. Chelsea's stories about loss, life, and everything in between are a beautiful invitation into understanding how we are affected by grief and how we can, in turn, affect lives around us for the better. Grief work is no small thing. It takes a bold heart and a curious mind to approach such overwhelming experiences with hope. So it is my hope that you heard and internalized some of Chelsea's embodiment of hope for yourself today, too. If this is your first time listening, you can find some more hope and resources for your own grief journey at mandykpart.com, as well as by joining our Patreon or the free coaching group on Facebook. Just search Restorative Grief or check out the show notes for links to everything. Be sure to snag a copy of Chelsea's book and follow her on social media because she's a great voice in grief encouragement. Remember to subscribe to the show, leave a review if you haven't yet, and as always, before we go, one last thing. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.